What a great time it was to be an American as the 20th century dawned. The robust Teddy Roosevelt entered the White House. George M. Cohan, draped in the American flag, pranced across the New York stage. At the market, eggs sold for 12 cents a dozen and sirloin steak for 24 cents a pound. It was a time when the Sears Roebuck catalog proffered 6 pairs of socks for $1.36 with a 6-month guarantee, provided the purchaser wore them alternately and changed them at least twice a week. During that first exciting decade, telephones were entering our homes and our lives forever. The Wright brothers launched us onward and upward, and Henry Ford gave the common man access to the open road with his Model T. Henry James wrote, "The will to grow was everywhere, written large, and to grow no matter what." It was a time of grand fulfillment for some, and a time of desperate longing for many. From southern Italy, they began flocking here in the late 1800s. They escaped not political or religious persecution as immigrants before them, but rather an exhausted economic system. In 1880, there were 1,656 Italian immigrants in Philadelphia. By 1905, the number had risen to about 70,000.
Nemmeno se tu esci m'aveva detta Francisco non è buono a fare un surreta Puzzessa ci la mamma che l'allavetta Se tu com'era amico, questo cose da fassari Quando domani sera sì, ma venga coca che segnari.
They settled first in South Philadelphia, but by the turn of the century, they followed the quarry-based trades and the lead of patron and steamship agent Frank Di Baradino into Overbrook.
Mo ce ne ve Francisco dall'Abruzza e trovo la mugliera tutta in grassetta.
And the Italian immigrants were looked down upon immediately by the established residents.
When we moved on 64th Street, they were all Irish people, and we were the first Italian there. And the Irish didn't like the Italian. In fact, in any neighborhood. I remember a contractor, Orlando, he moved down there 59th and Master. Because he was Italian, everybody tried to get him out. But he says, I'm an American citizen, I'm going to stay here.
All the two groups shared in common, it seemed, was their Catholic faith. On Sundays, the Italian women and children met their American neighbors at Our Lady of the Rosary Church. The religiously indifferent Italian men stayed away, perhaps passing their hard-won leisure at the local Venice Hotel on the 300 block of North 65th Street. The wives found the Irish worship cold and puritanical, found the language barrier insurmountable, and their fellow churchgoers unwelcoming. For their part, the Irish viewed the Italian practice as a combination of superstition and pageantry. In many places, Italians were shunted off into basements and modestly renovated buildings to hear Mass. Estrangement grew. Shortly, however, the Archbishop of Philadelphia responded with prudence to the need, and he summoned 32-year-old Reverend Pietro Michetti. The year was 1910, and Father Michetti was assigned the responsibility of founding a national parish for the 400 Italian families that had settled in Overbrook. St. Donato Parish was born. "1910 in itself was a noteworthy year. It was the year the Boy Scouts of America was chartered, that Father's Day was initiated. It was the year that plastics were invented and that the weekend as such was popularized. Ty Cobb again won the batting title that year. Jack Johnson successfully defended his heavyweight crown. And then, as now, the year marked the passing of Halley's Comet. On March 2nd, 1910, the property at 401 through 409 North 65th Street was purchased by Archbishop Ryan for $1, subject to an encumbrance of $3,300, as the site of the projected parish buildings. By July 16th, the basement church was ready for worship. Father McKetty celebrated opening Mass that morning, and benediction and festivities were planned for the evening. A cross of thousands of colored lanterns was drawn across the neighborhood, extending along Callowhill Street from 63rd to 65th, and along 64th Street from Girard Avenue to Vine Street. Vespers, a procession, and fireworks were promised as well. Unfortunately, the summer humidity burst at the seams at 8:05 that evening, and the heavens drenched the neighborhood with a renewing downpour. The following morning, the newly baptized parish, in turn, baptized its first member. Baby Charles Tatey, aged 3 weeks, was brought to the new basement church for christening. He was the first of thousands to be baptized into the faith community at St. Donato. Charlie grew up here and remembers our first pastor as a stern, no-nonsense figure.
Father McKetty was not oriented to advocate the fundamentals of sports and social activity. He wanted everybody to become a priest or become an older boy, and he was more like a warden going around the school and keeping an eye on everything, because anytime anybody saw him, everybody ran. They all were deathly afraid of him, but they respected him because he was very concerned about running the parish and keeping it under his supervision.
Charles Tatey married and moved to a neighboring parish 47 years ago. And yet, his allegiance remains here in a most fundamental sense. With pride, he relates,
I told my wife that if I died, I want to be buried from St. Donatus, because I think it was the nicest parish I ever belonged to.
St. Donato Church, named for the 4th century bishop of Arezzo, Italy, was immediately successful. With confidence, Father McKetty began a kindergarten in the rectory in 1912. He put out a call to Mother Cabrini to come and establish a school here. She answered Father's call and founded our school, an orphanage, and a convent. She installed her missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart as teachers, and these nuns have remained the backbone of our elementary education program. Our early years passed through the normal cycle of parish life. Sacraments celebrated, carnivals and processions held, and societies established. There was the great flu epidemic of 1918, when our school was closed and the building converted into a hospital for 2 months. There was a great war, and war losses, and victory. Meanwhile, the parish grew rapidly. By 1921, the need for a larger church building was obvious. A new foundation was made, and our upper church was erected, its campanile reaching triumphantly above Callowhill Street. Shortly, prohibition became the law of the land. It was a Protestant ethic, but it touched our community as well. One lifelong resident recalls,
They had a few speakeasy here, 67th and Medium. The guy Burnsy, he was a bootlegger. Then there was another bootlegger right next door. It was a roofer. And remember before they had pitch in a barrel? Well, they took the pitch out and they would put a 5-gallon keg of whiskey in there and pitch on top. A couple of guys on the truck with overhauls, a few mop buckets and pitch buckets, and a couple of rolls of tar paper, and they would deliver this hooch. Yeah, but then he got caught because they were talking too much. You know, they were bragging how they were getting away with it. Oh yeah. Then we had a policeman over here, Italian policeman. Every Sunday he'd be in different houses, eating macaroni and drinking wine. By golly, didn't he squeal on everybody? Callowhill Street, Parton Street, they raided the wine. And I remember we was in one house over there. all of us drinking wine. The guy said, go ahead, drink all the wine because the cops is going to take it away. Yeah, they raided all the houses. They took the wine away. And after that, it was all right. But we never seen that cop no more.
Of course, all kinds of hijinks, legal and otherwise, virtually ceased with the crash of 1929. Sadly, that was also the year that Father McKetty left our parish. He was followed in an unsteady succession during the next dozen years by a series of pastors, each of whom served a short time. The stabilizing figure in those times was rather a small Italian nun who arrived in 1930 and who was to remain with us for 30 years. The Apostolic Mother, Gennara, was to teach 2 generations of first graders the rudiments of language and mathematics in classes that sometimes numbered 100 or more. Mother Gennara is today living in a Chicago nursing home, and we, her students, wish her a blue and gold bouquet of love and gratitude. The 1930s were no worse here than anywhere else, and no better.
Nobody had any money. You know, there was no socializing. When you got around 16, we used to go to dances. One time we had a date. 2 of us had 1 girl. We couldn't afford 2 girls. We could take turns dancing with her.
The decade was marked by economic misery.
I worked while I was going to school, but I wanted to go to high school. My father said no, he needed me in the store. I had a grocery store on Hartford Avenue, and about twice a week we used to bring a lot of groceries down to the orphanages.
A low point in the life of St. Donato Parish occurred on Christmas Eve, 1938. Our young father, John Brennan, had finished hearing confessions and returned to the rectory, whereupon he lit the bulb in his window wreath and went for his shower. Apparently, the bulb was too large for the wreath and set it ablaze. The fire spread instantly. Despite the frantic efforts of 2 other priests, Father Brennan was trapped in his room and burned to death.
It was a terrible fire, and it was upstairs in his bedroom. And I remember them taking him out. It was so crowded, but I just didn't want to go see him because he was one of our priests. I remember when they told us to get away, and kids, you know, we all ran home, the youngsters.
Morning rose on the saddest Christmas in the life of our community.
When I come out of the house, people were throwing rice, and the rice getting in your hair, and really being nervous and rushing to the church and waiting for the bride to come in.
And I remember them throwing money. It's supposed to be good luck with the rice, I guess. Make it exciting. Kids would pick up the money, I guess, you know. Remember, we walked up to the altar the normal way, you know, stood in front of the sacristy there, and we were married. And he seemed pretty calm. If he was inside, I don't know. We had 2 limousines, and I could distinctly remember Angela. Remember Angela, Johnny Barone? She's dead now. Well, she emphasized on how much she liked my gown and all that. It was a chiffon, yeah, long trail, yeah.
During the recovery of the 1940s, our parish was noted for its continuing development and for its new pastor. This little giant from Foggia, Italy, came to us in 1941 and gradually led us into the modern day.
All the work was done after Monsignor Pastor came here. We all volunteered, you know, we went around collecting door to door. Went around and people pledged how much they were going to give. And then they decorated the church.
If Father McKetty was our cornerstone, the Reverend Michael J. Posto was our steeple and sounding bell. we rallied around him and paid off the huge debt left from the Depression years.